Throughout Chaos Galaxy's short-lived history, there have been many strong decks, such as Set 2's Baro Midrange, Set 3's Osos, or Set 4's Sindel Control. But has there ever been a Tier 0 deck? In this video, we will be breaking down the March 1st 22 format and answer the much asked question, is Palicium Tier 0? March 1st, 2022. Zach uploads a video titled 2022 Tournament and March Banlist. In this video, Zach showed the new banlist. The 6 changes were as follows: Cracker Beast of the Night Jungle from 1 to 2, Warple Jetpack from 1 to 2, Blaze Elixir from 1 to 2, both pieces of Gehenna from 2 to 1, Facile Sign from 2 to 1, Temple Traps from 2 to 1. At first, opinions on the banlist were split. One side thought the banlist was awful and it would create a degenerate meta dominated by Palicium. The other side thought that a fresh format was good, and if Palicium was too strong, players would find ways to adapt and to beat the deck. March 18, 2022. KO Cup 8 begins. KO Cup 8 was the first tournament of the format, and so players were figuring out what works and what doesn't. It's also important to note that KO Cups are casual tournaments, so often people aren't signing up with decks that they expect to win. KO Cup 8 had 8 participants sign up, with 2 DQing before playing a game. In the event, Secret 27 placed first with Palicium Midrange, the Zweistein placed second with Aggro Bugs, Sword placed third with Bugs Midrange, Log placed fourth with a random Bugs deck, Diamond Deploy placed fifth with Avamon, and Squid placed sixth with Aggro Bugs. KO Cup 8 shows a strong interest in playing the new cards from the planetary collections, however data from the tournament should be considered less reliable. April 10th, 2022. Response. The first SPL tournament of the format has begun. 16 participants signed up, with 2 dropping out without playing a game. These are the results for the top card of no response. Unseen Oddish placed first with Palicium Midrange. Secret 27 placed second with Omni's Control. Goldfish Gallant placed third with Palicium Midrange. Diamond Deploy placed fourth with Palicium Midrange. Drill Deal tied 5th with Stolo TK. Loeg tied 5th with Aggro Bugs. Brain Pixels tied 7th with Aggro Bugs. Leviathan tied 7th with Night Jungle Loop. Although it's still early in the format, Palicium made up 75% of top 4 and 37% of top 8, proving that it's a strong deck. Omni's Control placed second, however has not been placed in the tournament since. Stolo OTK placed 5th, and has since been adapted to be a quicker turbo-based OTK. NJ Loop was another rogue deck that placed 7th and has not been played since. Let's briefly look at the win rate of decks in no response. I won't go too in depth into what this means as I'll have the total win rates of decks at the end of the video. Omni's Control had a 75% win rate with 6 wins and 2 losses. Palicium Midrange had a 67% win rate with 12 wins and 6 losses. Stolo TK had a 33% win rate with 2 wins and 4 losses. NJ Loop had a 33% win rate with 1 win and 2 losses. Aggro Bugs had a 23% win rate with 3 wins and 10 losses. When only including data from top 5 SPL players playing against each other, Palicium Midrange had a 71% win rate with 5 wins and 2 losses. Omni's Control had a 60% win rate with 3 wins and 2 losses. Aggro Bugs had a 0% win rate with 0 wins and 3 losses. May 4th, 2022. KO Cup 9 begins. These are the results of KO Cup 9. Secret 27 placed first with Aggro Bugs. Diamond Deploy placed second with Palicium Midrange. Loeg placed third with Kazzarak. Unseen Oddish placed 4th with Turbo OTK. Mewsh tied 5th with Palicium Midrange. Drill Deal tied 5th with Turbo OTK. Snoopers tied 5th with Palicium Midrange. This tournament is important to note as it's the first tournament where Turbo OTK and Kazzarak were represented. Both these decks went on to become some of the best decks in the format. May 20th, 2022. Space Cup 3 was the second SPL tournament of the format. 16 participants signed up. No response was dominated by high health decks such as Palicium Midrange and Omni's Control, so when Space Cup 3 came around, players built decks around this. More decks were played with more ways to deal with high health creatures such as Kazzarak and birds. Due to the high health meta, decks also began to play cards such as KO. This is the A-player top cut of Space Cup 3. Unseen Oddish placed first with Palicium Midrange. Diamond Deploy placed second with Palicium Midrange. Drill Deal placed third with Turbo OTK. Lueg placed fourth with Kazzarak. Secret 27 tied fifth with Birds. Green Butler tied fifth with Aggro Bugs. Sword tied fifth with Birds. Jez tied fifth with Birds. After 2 SBR tournaments, Palicium is still proving popular after making up 50% of top 4 and 25% of top 8. Kazzarak and OTK both made up 25% of top cut and 13% of top 8. Aggro Bugs made up 13% of top 8 but did not make top cut. Birds made up 37% of top 8 but did not make top cut. Let's briefly look at the win rates of decks in Space Cup 3. Turbo OTK had a 75% win rate with 6 wins and 2 losses. Palicium Midrange had a 69% win rate with 11 wins and 5 losses. Kazzarak had a 43% win rate with 3 wins and 4 losses. Birds had a 36% win rate with 5 wins and 9 losses. Aggro Bugs had a 33% win rate with 2 wins and 4 losses. Random Shios had a 25% win rate with 1 win and 3 losses. Knights had a 0% win rate with 0 wins and 1 loss. When only including data from top 5 SBR players playing against each other, Palicium Midrange had a 67% win rate with 2 wins and 1 loss. Kazzarak had a 50% win rate with 2 wins and 2 losses. Birds had a 33% win rate with 1 win and 2 loss. July 16th, 2022. KO Cup 10 begins. These are the results of KO Cup 10. Mewsh placed first with Palicium Midrange. Lueg placed second with Atomic Gehenna Control. Secret 27 tied third with Shios Midrange. Bunsen Burn tied third with Palicium Midrange. Diamond Deploy tied fifth with Palicium Midrange. Zetaray tied fifth with Palicium Midrange. Jez tied fifth with Birds. June 25th, 2022. Mewsh's SummerSlam 22 begins. 7 players signed up. It's important to note that this tournament was an event that took place for 4 hours straight, so some players may not have signed up due to the time. Space Cup 3 was still dominated by high health creatures as well as combiner decks. Due to this, when Mewsh's SummerSlam came around, decks began to sideboard more aggressive options such as Time Flash Portal and Combustion. Time Flash Portal also helped against the newly popular Turbo OTK. This is the 7-player top cut of Mewsh's SummerSlam 2022. Lueg placed first with Kazzarak. Unseen Oddish placed second with Turbo OTK. Diamond Deploy placed third with Palicium Midrange. Drill Deal placed fourth with Turbo OTK. Nova placed fifth with Kazzarak. Secret 27 placed sixth with Baro Midrange. Snoopers placed seventh with Palicium Midrange. Mewsh's SummerSlam 2022 only had 4 different decks, which by the end of the format was considered to beat the meta. Turbo OTK makes up 50% of top 4. Palicium Midrange and Kazzarak make up 25% of top 4. Turbo OTK and Kazzarak make up 29% of top 8. Palicium Midrange makes up 28% of top 8. Baro Midrange makes up 14% of top 8. Let's briefly look at the win rate of decks in Mewsh's SummerSlam 2022. Turbo OTK had a 57% win rate with 4 wins and 3 losses. Kazzarak had a 57% win rate with 4 wins and 3 losses. Palicium Midrange had a 40% win rate with 2 wins and 3 losses. Baro Midrange had a 0% win rate with 0 wins and 1 loss. When only including data from top 5 SBR players playing against each other, Turbo OTK had a 67% win rate with 2 wins and 1 loss. Kazzarak had a 67% win rate with 2 wins and 1 loss. Palicium Midrange had a 0% win rate with 0 wins and 1 loss. Baro Midrange had a 0% win rate with 0 wins and 1 loss. July 9th, 2022. The Secret Series begins. 8 players signed up. It's important to note that everybody in this event made top cut, so this caused some players such as Unseen Oddish and Jez to scoop all their Swiss games. The Secret Series had few changes in terms of decks from Mewsh's SummerSlam, as the meta was becoming more and more defined. This is the 8-player top cut of the Secret Series. Secret 27 placed first with Baro Midrange. Lueg placed second with Kazzarak. Diamond Deploy placed third with Palicium Midrange. Jez placed 4th with Kazzarak. Unseen Oddish placed 5th with Turbo OTK. Squid placed 6th with Aggro Bugs. Mewsh placed 7th with Palicium Midrange. Duriel Deal placed 8th with Palicium Midrange. The Secret Series had 5 different decks played. Kazzarak made up 50% of top 4. Baro Midrange and Palicium Midrange made up 25% of top 4. Palicium Midrange made up 37% of top 8. Kazzarak made up 25% of top 8. Baro Midrange and Turbo OTK made up 13% of top 8. Aggro Bugs made up 12% of top 8. Let's briefly look at the win rate of decks in the Secret Series. Baro Midrange had a 75% win rate with 6 wins and 2 losses. Aggro Bugs had a 50% win rate with 2 wins and 2 losses. Turbo OTK had a 50% win rate with 1 win and 1 loss. Kazzarak had a 40% win rate with 2 wins and 3 losses. Palicium Midrange had a 33% win rate with 3 wins and 6 losses. When only including data from top 5 SBR players playing against each other, Baro Midrange had an 80% win rate with 4 wins and 1 loss. Palicium Midrange had a 33% win rate with 1 win and 2 losses. Kazzarak had a 33% win rate with 1 win and 2 losses. Turbo OTK had a 0% win rate with 0 wins and 1 loss. This is the combined data from all SBR tournaments this format. When looking at the combined top 8 decks from SBR tournaments this format, 31 decks made top 8s this format. Palicium Midrange made up 32% of top 8 decks being played 10 times. Kazzarak made up 16% of top 8 decks being played 5 times. Turbo OTK made up 13% of top 8 decks being played 4 times. Aggro Bugs made up 13% of top 8 decks being played 4 times. Birds made up 10% of top 8 decks being played 3 times. Baro Midrange made up 6% of top 8 decks being played 2 times. NJ Loop made up 3% of top 8 decks being played once. Stall OTK made up 3% of top 8 decks being played once. Omni's Control made up 3% of top 8 decks being played once. Looking at the combined win rate from SBR tournaments this format, Omni's Control has a 75% win rate with 6 wins and 2 losses. Baro Midrange has a 67% win rate with 6 wins and 3 losses. Turbo OTK has a 65% win rate with 11 wins and 6 losses. Palicium Midrange has a 58% win rate with 28 wins and 20 losses. Kazzarak have a 47% win rate with 9 wins and 10 losses. Birds have a 66% win rate with 5 wins and 9 losses. Stall OTK has a 33% win rate with 2 wins and 4 losses. NJ Loop has a 33% win rate with 1 win and 2 losses. Aggro Bugs have a 30% win rate with 7 wins and 16 losses. Random Shios has a 25% win rate with 1 win and 3 losses. Knights have a 0% win rate with 0 wins and 1 loss. If we place these decks into the tiers based off the definitions from earlier, Omni's Control is tier 0, Baro Midrange is tier 0, Turbo OTK is tier 1, Palicium Midrange is tier 1, Kazzarak is tier 2, Birds is tier 3, NJ Loop is tier 3, Stall OTK is tier 4, Aggro Bugs is tier 4. When looking at the combined win rate from top 5 SBR players this format, Baro Midrange has a 67% win rate with 4 wins and 2 losses. Omni's Control has a 60% win rate with 3 wins and 2 losses. Palicium Midrange has a 47% win rate with 8 wins and 4 losses. Kazzarak have a 50% win rate with 5 wins and 5 losses. Turbo OTK has a 50% win rate with 2 wins and 2 losses. Birds have a 33% win rate with 1 win and 2 losses. Aggro Bugs have a 0% win rate with 0 wins and 3 losses. If we place these decks into the tiers based off the definitions from earlier, Baro Midrange is tier 0, Omni's Control is tier 1, Palicium Midrange is tier 1, Kazzarak is tier 2, Turbo OTK is tier 2, Birds is tier 4, Aggro Bugs is tier 4. So, looking to the stats, this is the format. From looking at these, the format doesn't look that bad, right? There's no deck that stands out as OP. Although I think these stats are helpful in getting a rough gauge of the format, I believe that many of these numbers are misrepresentations of where the decks sit within the format. For example, using the stats, the tier list says that Omni's Control and Baro Midrange are both tier 0, as they have a win rate higher than 65%. This, however, is why context is important when looking at statistics. Omni's Control has only been played in no response in which players were still making the shift from the previous format. Omni's Control has also only played 8 games going 6-2, which is a very small sample size. So why are these stats so off? Let's introduce a new tier into our tier list called Rogue Tier. MTG defines a rogue deck in two ways. Rogue decks are designed specifically to beat a dominant deck, but this almost always comes at the cost of being less effective against the rest of the field. Alternatively, rogue deck can mean that a deck that is developed secretly in the run-up to a tournament and so arrives on the day completely unknown to the opponents, giving the pilot the element of surprise. Omni's control fits both definitions. It was built a few days before the tournament with the intentions of beating Palicium, which was the most popular deck. In the days leading up to the tournament, the deck was only played in 1 or 2 Fight Clubs, so to most of the community the deck was a secret. Therefore, it's safe to consider Omni's control a rogue deck. Birds also fits both definitions. It has only been played in one tournament, that tournament being Space Cup 3. The deck was built in the lead up to the tournament and had only been played in 1 or 2 Fight Clubs. The deck was also built with the intentions of beating Palicium Midrange, knowing that the deck would perform poorly against the rest of the meta. Therefore, it's safe to consider Birds a rogue deck. When implementing the rogue tier into the tier list, according to the stats, the tier list looks something like this. So now that we know what the stats show, let's look and see if the community's opinion matches the stats. August 8th, 2022, I sent out a poll asking the community about the win rates of different decks. When combining all the answers and adjusting the combined answers to 100 games, the community thinks the win rates of the decks look something like this. Participants were only asked about the win rate of these 4 decks, as other decks either aren't good enough or haven't been played enough for a well-educated answer. It's also important to note that one participant was unable to answer one of the matchups due to a lack of knowledge and understanding of that matchup, so the average answer of the other participants was used to fill the void. If we use this information to create a tier list based off the definitions from earlier, it will look like this. Palicium Midrange is tier 0, there are no tier 1 decks, Baro Midrange is tier 2, Turbo OTK is tier 3, Kazzarak is tier 4. It's important to note that people's opinions change based on the deck lists in the matchup, and these decks can be built in many ways. When looking at participants' decks, it's safe to say that the average Palicium Midrange deck looks something like this. The average Baro Midrange deck looks something like this. The average Turbo OTK deck looks something like this. The average Kazzarak deck looks something like this. Up until this point, we have either looked at stats or the community's opinions. This next section will go over my opinions on the format, and will cover a mini deck profile on each deck. This is how I'd build Palicium Midrange. Most of the cards are standard in Palicium Midrange, however I'll briefly discuss a few of the more controversial cards. I chose to play 2 Zetero Mentalossus over 2 Zetero Swordreus as I value the health Mentalossus offers compared to Swordreus' weak health. Swordreus helps more against the Palicium Midrange and Turbo OTK matchups, whereas Mentalossus helps more against Kazzarak and Baro Midrange. I chose Mentalossus as it's particularly good against Baro Midrange. Mentalossus survives against Death, Venator, and Queen, whereas Swordreus would die. This forces the Baro Midrange player to use removal or a large creature, which allows you to have your other large creatures stick. Mystical Beast of the Deep is also slightly controversial. I only decided to play 1 as I believe 2 is unnecessary, as you do not need that much recursion. However, I do like the value 1 Mystical Beast of the Deep offers, as it can help get back KOP to get back Duples or Rowdies, Serpent if you have more Palifors left, or even just Cabostrus to force more removal from the opponent. I also decided to play Facile Sign, as the threat of the card offers an extreme amount of value against Baro Midrange, as now they must play around both Pelfam and Facile Sign during their Inox turn. Facile Sign also has its uses versus Kazzarak to steal one of their few creatures, to open up the board and play more aggressive. Facile Sign is also good in the Palicium Mirror to steal their larger creatures if they ever get low on stars. In the sideboard I play 2-time Flash Portal, as it's good against OTK, Kazzarak, and occasionally Baro Midrange. Combustion allows you to play more aggressively against Kazzarak, and Erratic Void is one of the best counters against Palicium in the mirror. I decided to leave out Quadruple Wormhole, as I couldn't think of a matchup where I need more gas than my opponent. The win condition of Palicium Midrange is to play multiple large creatures each turn, and force the opponent to respond to them each turn. If the opponent cannot respond, you can burst in for points that turn. Typically Palicium Midrange has card advantage, as all these big creatures often force 2 cards to remove 1. They manage to keep their star advantage through cards like Duple Drop and Rowdy. This is how I'd build Baro Midrange. Most of the cards are standard in Baro midrange, however I'll briefly discuss a few of the more controversial cards. Firstly, it's important to note that this deck is a midrange deck, so cards like Garuda were left out as they were too aggressive. Dark Baro was also left out, as generally Pluga is used with Desert Quake and Batterer with Queen, so Dark Baro didn't have enough targets. I play 2 Shears in Lava Behemoth as it can kill anything in Palicium. This does make your star economy awkward at times, although usually if you play correctly and have good follow-up in hand you shouldn't run into any problems. Some would consider Boominator to be bad, but it allows you to easily uptrade into cards like Cranchon, Pelfam, Mystical Beast of the Deep, and Swordrees. It's also one of your best aggressive options with Blaze Elixir in the Kazzaraks and OTK matchups. In the sideboard I play 2 Time Flash Portal for any matchup where I want to be the aggressor. These are typically versus OTK, Kazzaraks, or any rogue control decks. Combustion allows you to play more aggressively against Kazzaraks, and Erratic Void allows you to hurt Palicium midrange's star economy. The win condition of Baro midrange varies from matchup to matchup. Against Turbo OTK you want to play as aggressive as possible as you're on a clock. Against Kazzaraks you want to be the aggressor, however you need to take it a bit slower and look to burst them down rather than just being aggressive. Against Palicium midrange you want to uptrade into their bigger creatures using cards like Boominator, Dare, Desert Quake, and KO. Then once you've built a star advantage, you can drop Inox without having to worry about Pelfam or Facile Sign. This is how I'd build Turbo OTK. Most of the cards are standard in Turbo OTK, however I'll briefly discuss a few of the more controversial cards. I play 2 Gulwak over the usual one, as resolving this card is extremely impactful. It can remove threats that attack twice per turn, such as Queen of the Baro World, a creature with Blaze Elixir, or the Ground Kazzarak. As well as this removal, it speeds you up at the same time. Due to Gulwak being played at 2, Aplu is also played to search for Glow. The sideboard is rarely used, but Time Flash Portal is for matchups that play creatures with death triggers so that they can attack face. Activation Activated Activator can be sided in against any deck playing activators that stop the combo before Bernard can be played, such as Burning Damocloid, Black Hole Blocker, or Leviathan Crown. 5-Starred Fossil, Dark Baro, and Velahex Mine are all used for matchups where you want to speed yourself up and may have useless cards in the main deck. The win condition of Turbo OTK is to find your combo pieces as soon as possible so that you can resolve the OTK. Many staple cards have been removed from the deck to focus on nothing but speed and consistency. This is how I'd build Kazzaraks. Most of the cards are standard in Kazzaraks, however I'll briefly discuss a few of the more controversial cards. Only 1 Orb of is played due to the Staller offers being excessive in some matchups. 1 Charge Blaster is played to offer burst options with Ground Kazzarak, as well as to kill cards that need to be attacked twice, such as FaceTime and Atatrox, as Kazzaraks do not always have the option to be able to attack twice in one turn. Only 1 Talacon's Helm is played, as you do not need to loop the Kazzarak this many times. I chose to cut Talacon's Helm over Combine Harvester, as Talacon's Helm can allow you to be bursted down by cards such as Pelfam, Keller Mask, and the Sky Kazzarak. 1 Erratic Void was main deck to slow down Palicium, and although not as impactful, it has its uses against other matchups like Baro midrange. In the sideboard I play 1 Orbov and 2 Rewind Wormhole for any matchup where you need to slow down the opponent. I play 2 Temple of the Archangels for the OTK matchup, as you can force them to wait multiple turns and force Calamasks from their hand to kill the card. Admittedly, I haven't playtested this card, so it could completely flop. I also cite Erratic Void as extremely good against Palicium. The win condition of Kazzaraks is to loop either the Sky Kazzarak or the Ground Kazzarak each turn. During the mid-game they can extend their board to 3 zones so that each turn they can loop 1 Combiner Kazzarak as well as 1 Kazzarak Creator. This 2-creature board loop is very hard to break once it gets going. When given the right opportunity, the deck can also play aggressive if they draw a lot of Combiner pieces, as they can loop Ground Kazzarak, which attacks twice for 8 points each turn, and use cards like Charge Blaster, Galaxy Crash, and Facile Sign to play more aggressively during these turns. By no means do I think these decks are perfect. I'm yet to test a lot of these things, and now that the format is over, it's likely that they will never be tested. But if I were to bring these decks to a tournament, my deck lists would look nearly identical to these. Now that you know what the decks look like, I'll go through where I think these decks sit in the meta. If each matchup was played 100 times by 2 players of equally high skill, this is how I would expect the results to look. I believe Palicium midrange beats Turbo OTK 80-20, as it can easily get up 5-point attackers by turn 2, and even sometimes turn 1 by using Double Drop or Serpent. Sometimes Palicium can even set up board states that are nearly impossible for OTK to get through. However, sometimes Turbo OTK can draw well and get off the combo before Palicium can set up. Similarly to Turbo OTK, I believe Palicium midrange is too fast for Kazzaraks and should beat it at 80 to 20. Statistically, Kazzaraks take 4.5 turns to get out their first combiner. However, with cards like Spoons, Cosmic and Relic's Mine, it more realistically takes 4 turns. This gives Palicium midrange 4 turns to attack phase, or at least get rid of any stall cards such as Orbov or Point Turret. Considering my deck plays 2 Time Flash Portal and 2 Combustion, from that point they can easily just burst Kazzaraks down. The Baro midrange matchup, however, needs to be approached with more caution. Usually Palicium midrange should win 75 to 25. Generally in this matchup, the winner is the one with more card advantage and better star economy. As long as Palicium can do this and play around Inox by holding a Facile Sign or Galaxy Crash, they should have no problem getting ahead on star and card advantage, and from there, winning the set. I believe the Turbo OTK vs Kazzaraks matchup is 85 to 15, although this could improve for Kazzaraks depending on how big of an impact Temple of the Archangels has. However, if Archangels has a minimal impact, Turbo OTK should win nearly every time. As stated previously, Kazzarak should get their first combiner out by around turn 4, and by that point Turbo OTK is about halfway to getting their combo. I'm yet to test this matchup too much with Temple of the Archangels, but I do expect it to be heavily favoured towards Turbo OTK. Against Baro midrange, I expect Turbo OTK to lose most of the time at 30 to 70. Baro midrange has access to lots of aggressive options such as Queen of the Baro World, Blaze Elixir, Boominator, Desert Quake, and Time Flash Portal for games 2 and 3. I may have underestimated OTK in this matchup, and I could see a case for it being 35 to 65. However, I believe it's favoured to Baro midrange due to their various aggressive options. When Kazzaraks go up against Baro midrange, I'd expect Kazzaraks to lose most of the time at 30 to 70, as Baro midrange has more aggressive options. When Baro midrange sideboards 2 Time Flash Portal and 2 Combustion, it gives them an insane amount of removal options to swing face. As mentioned before, Kazzaraks take a while to get set up, and so Baro midrange can capitalize on those early turns and get in usually 4 to 6 points. When placing these decks into tiers based off the definitions from earlier, it looks like this. Palicium midrange is tier 0, there are no tier 1 decks, Baro midrange is tier 2, Turbo OTK is tier 3, Kazzarak is tier 4. If you want to include a rogue tier, Omnius Control and Birds can be placed into this tier, as both these decks are built to beat Palicium midrange, making their matchups against other decks worse. So let's answer the much asked question. Is Palicium tier 0? To say the least, the answer is too complicated to be answered in a simple yes or no. Many assumptions must be made on what defines a tier 0 deck, and where you get the data from to determine what tier the deck is. Assuming the definitions and data from earlier are being used, Palicium midrange is tier 1 based off SPR results. It remains tier 1 regardless of whether you include only top 5 SPR players or not. The community generally disagrees with this and thinks Palicium midrange is tier 0. I agree with the community that Palicium midrange is tier 0. Hopefully this video was helpful at recapping the format, explaining why certain decks were good, and why certain cards were played. All data, deck lists, graphs, and tables can be found in the description. Thank you for watching.